The energy paradox literature isn't the only one to offer solutions to the Cairo case. Hausman's caution that we use models that differentiate stock from utilization and try to capture the interplay of technological change and consumer choice also includes the caveat that we not make assumptions about what least cost design really means, and to whom. Newell, Jaffe, and Stavins in 1999 reminded us that, quote, technological change is inherently a microeconomic phenomenon, end quote. While Kant and Groot and Nahuis, 2002, in the European Journal of Political Economy, have tried to get us to think about the impact on different social classes, not just on owners and managers of firms or businesses. The basic conclusion we arrive at is that new technologies that carry a substantial cost that is necessarily borne by workers are unlikely to be adopted. Moreover, in an anti-competitive environment, it is more likely that a new technology is resisted as the share of the rent associated with the new technology that accrues to workers is relatively small, making them more hesitant towards adoption. End quote. Page 4. Their logic could also be applied to households. The cost of many technologies may be differently borne by different members of the household. Many times in our survey, we visited households where a bathroom had been created with pretty ceramic tiles and an installed electric heater as a way of attracting a wife, the bowerbird phenomenon. But shortly after the marriage, the heater had been disconnected and the wife asked to return to heating water on the kitchen stove. In other households, people who had had bad experience with appliance heaters had adopted what was to them a newer technology, which we in the West consider a step backwards, the one-eye portable gas stove. See, small portable gas stoves are easy to move around the house, much easier than the traditional kerosene babur, but they emit no smoke and are inexpensive to fill, and they began to hit the Cairo market a few years ago. Previously, the only gas canisters available were the large tanks used for kitchen stoves. The small portable one-eyes, known in the West as butane camping stoves, are made in China and can be purchased for as little as 50 Egyptian pounds in nearly every small shop in both communities, making it by far the easiest way to heat water. They put out roughly 16,500 BTUs, and they take approximately 3.5 minutes to boil 1 liter of water. Thus, 10 liters of bath temperature water at 40 degrees Celsius can be heated in approximately 15 minutes. From the perspective of many end users, these stoves carry advantages that conventional appliances do not. It takes the same amount of time, for example, to heat water with an electric heater. And because of their newness, they're actually considered modern and therefore desirable. The energy ladder literature explores some of the biases we bring with us when we assume that development follows a linear technological path from heavier to lighter fuel sources. The literature assumes that, unless otherwise constrained, people will progress from solid fuels to liquid fuels to gaseous fuels, and finally strive for the apogee of light fuels, electricity. The literature is curiously silent about the lightest of fuels, light, and makes almost no mention of solar energy as a part of the putative ladder. Isn't that interesting? A lot of marketing effort by oligopolists like Olympic Heaters, Olympic Appliances, an Egyptian manufacturer which has 85% of the market share in white goods in Egypt, has been put into convincing Egyptians that electric heaters are the most desirable, the apogee of civilization. From the perspective of many bourgeois Egyptians we talked to, going back to gas was considered retrograde motion, and using a camping stove, using one indoors, a form of barbarism. Even solar heating was considered by a radio show host who interviewed us to be something that would only be appropriate for and interest the poor. The host said, "I admire what you do, but in Zamalek we like our electric heaters." Nonetheless, the advent and abundance of efficient low-cost camping stoves in a market where nobody has the luxury of camping shows that families are considering these stoves to be technological advances. A good source for these arguments is Barnes, Brendan R., 2005, in Interventions to Reduce Child Exposure to Indoor Air Pollution in Developing Countries, Behavioral Opportunities and Research Needs in Children, Youth and Environments, Issue 15, Volume 1, 67 through 82. Go read it. But why had efforts to induce solar hot water since the 1970s failed? And why was there data suggesting that up to 3/4 of some of the neighborhoods had no hot water? Two possible explanations are those that were given to us by bourgeois Egyptian employees of USAID when we applied for a grant to train people how to build solar hot water heaters for themselves. 1, the poor don't need hot water, and 2, the poor aren't well enough educated to understand new technologies. I lived with the poor. I'm of Arab ancestry. I consider these bourgeois sentiments to be offensive. Other, less prejudiced, and more likely possibilities are that the city's poor communities are caught between infrastructural constraints, information asymmetries, and cultural norms that compound the difficulties they face in making rational choices, while at the same time, uncertainties about the government-subsidized energy prices distort market incentives to pick the optimum watergy solution for their income. This is particularly true when there's no sub-metering. See Lampieri et al. 2001, Utility Pricing in the Poor for more on this. In my view, it was possible to test all these possibilities using the optic of consumer choice theory, which assumes rational actors satisficing based on the information and opportunities around them. But what is it about these two communities that makes their aggregate choices so different? Within particular income brackets, quintiles such as 0 to 400, 400 to 800, 800 to 1200, 1200 to 1600, 1600 to 2000 Egyptian pounds per month, we would see more similarities, or would we see more similarities between these two communities? And if not, why not? As I began my research, I found that the GTZ data was wrong. There was nobody who was without hot water. Everybody had some way of getting water heated for bathing and clothes washing. I also found that the assumption of the bourgeois about their poorer countrymen was also wrong. Almost everybody I visited and talked to said that hot water was important, or very important, and that they needed it. The question seemed to be more, how important is convenient hot water, and what does convenient mean? What are the trade-offs? While roughly 50% of Cairo's historic slum dwellers are taking advantage of the availability of well-marketed and reasonably inexpensive, in terms of purchase price, electric hot water heaters, the other half uses gas, and of these the majority heat their water on the stove. 15 to 20% have gas heating appliances, but they must use the same gas tanks that are used for stove cooking because no natural gas pipelines have been put into this part of the city. While the same condition persists across the city of the dead in the informal community of the Zabalin, the garbage pickers, this community shows slightly less than 30% using electric heaters and only about 6% using gas appliance heaters. Additionally, in Darb al-Ahmar, 4 to 8% still use the dangerous kerosene-burning babur, while a similar percentage of Zabalin residents use the dangerous ground stove or hamel. Why are these two adjacent communities behaving so differently? And why, given that they universally have access to subsidized electricity, while using gas involves high transaction costs and uncertainties, and using baburs and hamels carry such high health and safety risks, why are they behaving differently than the energy ladder literature would predict, given that they're purchasing other electric goods, refrigerators, television sets, satellite receivers, that cost much more than water heaters? I was and I am intrigued by household energy utility decisions that appear to depart from what would seem like the best strategy for maximizing overall economic utility, in terms of time and opportunity costs as well as money. Why were the urban poor of Cairo making the decisions they were for heating water? And what could this tell us about modernization and the assumptions we make about where household decision-making is headed at a time of climate change, rising and uncertain energy prices, rampant indoor and outdoor air and water pollution, and scarcity? Ultimately, my questions led me home again, home to what I could do at home. Why was I making the decisions I was for heating water? And if I could find a way to eliminate fossil fuels and nuclear power from my own life, at least as concerned obtaining my own hot water and electricity at home, then and only then could I realistically begin the dialogue of how to help others, help us all, get out of hot water.